everyone who is listening or watching out there. My name is Nathaniel Barthouse. I am the artist. I just said my wrong last name. My name is Nathaniel Coe. I am the artistic director of Virtual Theater Lab. I am here joined today with my co-host Daniel McCouts, who is an associative creative team member. And then we are interviewing today and doing an industry talkback with Casey Ross of Catalyst Theater Company and author, playwright, musician, all-around artist. So we're going to go ahead and let her introduce herself, and then we're going to open up the floor to some questions, and we're going to ask some questions we have. If you're watching from Facebook land, we are monitoring those questions, so if you want to type something, feel free to go right ahead and do that, and we'll go ahead and ask it.
All right.
Take it away, Casey.
Well, yeah, like Nathaniel just introduced me, I am Casey Ross. I have been writing professionally for theater since I was about 17. I wrote my first play, Gallery, that you guys read last night. Then my freshman year of college, and I am an avid participant in Fringe Festival here in Indy. I've yet to go on tour to other fringes, but it is a goal of mine. So I write about a show a year, and I also tour a kind of a strange piece of theater around to various like comic book and video game conventions called Arcade Fire, that is a stage musical about video games, but it's structured a little bit more different than a traditional play because obviously it's at conventions. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much. There we go. So yeah, how many shows have you written exactly? You've written a lot. You've written the Gallery Trilogy, Arcade Fire, the Hellish Mall musical, Tortillo.
1 and 2, yeah. That one's going to be a trilogy as well. Not quite as serious as the Gallery Trilogy. Not that they're like fully serious pieces either, but it's very zany. Yeah, it doesn't get quite as heavy and real as Gallery. And then I've written another show called The Ripple Effect, which is probably one of my longer shows, and a fairy tale called Slaying the Dragon, and another piece that was for Fringe that I eventually adapted into a full production called Q, about museum employees. So like the line Q, it's spelled Queue. People are like, what is Q? And then I used to work for the Shawnee Theater of Bloomfield, Indiana, and for 3 years I would write their young artist play as well as their children's play. So they had 8 to 10-year-olds were doing the like children's play, and then they'd have like teen theater, and I would write both of those every year for about 3 or 4 years. So that amassed 20-something children's plays, but I think I have 12 adult plays in my lexicon, from short 10-minute pieces to the full length we mentioned. So not all of those are as massive as a full play, but
that's incredible. Does anyone have questions for Casey?
Daniel, I can do questions.
Unmute yourself. Go right ahead.
So what kind of conventions do you go to where you do the video game play?
So we went to the most recent one before coronavirus kind of took that out of my wheelhouse of things I was doing. We went to Bloomington Normal retro video game show. We did a production at Gen Con. We have done in conjunction science fiction fantasy convention, PopCon and Comic-Con here in Indy. And I just got called and asked Southern Fried Gaming Expo, which is one of the biggest retro games. And I'm talking like stand-up arcade machines retro, not like even Nintendo retro. These are like the oldest of old games. They just called and they would like my podcast as well as the play to have some sort of hand in their virtual convention they're doing in 8 days. So I'm going to slap together some virtual content for the show. But yeah, we've been mainly around the Midwest, just because it's kind of pricey to take 5 actors and 2 Donkey Kongs on the road. But the next thing we should be doing, fingers crossed, if the second wave doesn't get us, is we will be at Kong Off 8 in New Jersey, which is a Donkey Kong World Championship.
Oh, fun. I didn't even know they had Donkey Kong championships. That's awesome.
They
That's what
still do.
that's what the show's about. Casey, go ahead and really quick tell us about what Arcade Fire is if people don't know what it is because of
The
its
strange man over
origins.
my left shoulder is actually who the play is about. His name is Billy Mitchell. He was the first Donkey Kong world record holder, as well as the first man to actually beat Pac-Man, meaning that the game had no more memory and it just dies. Like, people weren't supposed to be able to beat arcade games, and this guy is so good that he was just breaking them left and right. So back in the 90s, Namco gave him the award of Video Game Player of the Century, which kind of went on to upset a lot of his competition. And years later down the road, with the advent of the internet, some folks have accused him of cheating at Donkey Kong to get all of his records. So he is actually in the middle of a real legal court case about his Donkey Kong scores from the 80s and 90s. And that's kind of where the musical picks up. Is Billy is suing the other contenders of esports for defamation right now. Well, not defamation; it's for malice, but defamation of character plays into that. And I thought it was ridiculous and interesting. I didn't know much about him other than what I was reading online, but I wrote the piece, and I guess I got the courage to give him a call via Facebook onto his fan page, and he was kind enough to pick up the phone and hear me out about why I wanted to do it. And he actually came out and saw the first production, and we really hit it off. So that's what we've been doing the last 3 years, is just perfecting the show. And the tagline of the show is the redemption of Billy Mitchell, because he's been plastered as the bad guy for his 40-year career, and now we're kind of trying to do that heel to face turn, I guess, in his older years. So we hit the road with our redemption propaganda.
That's something you can't make up.
No, it's not.
Incredible. So, if you take Arcade Fire and compare it to your other work that you've directed and other work that you've written, even, like, if you look at Arcade Fire, Tortillo, and the Gallery Trilogy, they're all very different. You as a writer, like, what is your process of sitting down and thinking about what your next piece is, or does it just come to you? And what's your development? Because you don't really have a specific genre. Like Martin McDonough, when someone says Martin McDonough, you're like, oh, it's going to be a shit fuck of a play. Like, it's going to be a lot.
It's not going to be happy. Yeah.
At once. Yeah, no, it's not going to be happy. I'm trying to think of another one. Tracy Letts. Again,
yes.
People are going to get uncomfortable. But with you, if some people who know your work and we say we're doing a Casey Ross play, you don't know what you're getting. So walk us through that.
I think, like, maybe my staple as a writer is I'm very banter and dialogue heavy. I also write pretty chunky, meaty monologues. Like, I mean, you guys obviously saw that, last night with Gallery, and probably even more so with Portraits, because there are some beast of monologues in that one. I tend to be like a really rhythmic writer, and I always say I have character before I have plot. So, like with Gallery, I just kind of heard Frank and Jackson in my head. And they came from the place that I was actually an art major in college at the time. So that kind of like critique of yourself through your art was very prevalent in my life. So that was just like two voices I very strongly heard. I do kind of across the board, even if it's just referential, I dabble a lot in like the ideas of pop culture and the idea of becoming obsolete in your field. Like, I think that's a big fear for Frank and Jackson, is like, that they'll never be household name artists. Frank obviously takes a much more conservative approach to his career, whereas Jackson tries to dabble into shock value to find lasting fame. Like with Tortillo, it's as ridiculous as it is, because just a little bit about that play. It's about a group of stack food employees who work at a stackable, like, Pringles-esque chip company, and they find out the flavor powder on the chips is laced with cocaine, so they set out to solve the mystery themselves. And one kind of a Frank and Jackson dynamic, which is typical of my work, two buddies that are odd couple in a way. The more hyperactive one says, like, this is our chance to be Batman. Like, we get to be the heroes. Like, every man will get to tell this story. And so it becomes Steve and Dave in that play taking on the idea that they're going to be stuck forever as these like middle America factory employees. That's something I deal with in Q as well. He starts hearing the soundtrack of his own life in his head, and it's very depressing because he feels like he hasn't made anything of himself before 30. So yeah, I tend to deal with these time-stamped pieces of what we do with like people when obsolescence happens, and also people just feeling stuck, like themes of stagnation. I don't know if that's personal for me or not, but it's what I've been writing about for a while, I guess.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, you've been writing for over 15 years, correct? Over
Yeah,
13 years.
yeah, because my first play was Gallery at 17, and I am 34 now. I don't care to say how old I am. But yeah,
The moment I said you've been writing for how long, I was like,
no,
I can't ask her age, so
no, it's
great.
fine.
um, yeah, for everyone saw Gallery last night, and many of those people are in the group who performed Gallery, and there's people watching who watched it last night. I would have never
It
thought
was
that.
one of my Jackson's birthdays today, the one that's in the painting. So
Oh,
yeah,
awesome, awesome.
big 4-0.
Oh, wow. Um, I would have never thought that was written by a 17-year-old. That's a really, really heavy, really beautiful piece, and you're putting a lot of those characters in a lot of stuff that, I mean, even me at 25 wouldn't really think of characters that way. I mean, I would sometimes, but I have a really scary brain. Um, but,
I
but
get
yeah,
that.
at 17, wow, that's crazy. Um, Gallery Trilogy is completely done, right? Uh, we can't really
Yes,
talk a lot about that because our audience hasn't seen the rest of
spoiler.
it. But Gallery's done. You're done with Gallery.
Yes, I should have brought it and had it next to me. That trilogy of plays is the only thing thus far that I have published. It's through the Geeky Press that they actually were started in Indianapolis. They've since moved to, I want to say Milwaukee. I'm not sure where he moved his publishing house to, but I have like a coffee table book where it's all three of the plays. Each play got a dedication from me to like the actors, and then my playwriting teacher, who I started writing the show under in my collegiate freshman year playwriting class, actually wrote a foreword of the book about just kind of the nature of the plays and what you'll get with my kind of plays. And it's kind of one of my favorite things that's ever been written about me, because he's not a huge fan of the gallery plays. We talked about it a little bit yesterday with the idea of two protagonists, and he's a very big proponent of like, when you're a new writer, you should write what you know. And his whole thing was like, what do you know about being a gay man in your 30s, 17-year-old college freshman? I'm like, I know, I can write this show. I was kind of writing him, don't tell him. But yeah, so it's published, and I don't think it'll ever be changed too much. I've been interested in doing a film adaptation, not because I have a ton of interest in film, um, but I'm starting to see with like the advent of streaming and things online, um, the live theaters like the NBC like musical things and Hamilton being out in like a couple of days, like that kind of a vessel that we're going to have to communicate during not only the virus but just in general. Like theater audiences are dwindling, so I've been toying around with the idea of like how would I film this in a way where it could still kind of maintain its existence as a play but also work as a film, because I
Right.
think it's super sitcom-y, so I don't think it would be too far of a leap. So we will see.
No. No. No.
But that's kind of the only foreseeable thing I have on the horizon with it, other than, if I submit it to theaters or contests or anything.
Yeah. Tortilla was the first work of yours I ever saw.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
got some. No, it's fine. It's fine. I was little backstory. I had wanted to audition for her production of Diviners, because I love that show. We did a virtual reading of that 3 weeks ago, and I talked about that the whole time. I was like, it's so
Oh,
good. But so I had went to see this Fringe night she was doing where they were doing a preview of Tortilo, and I was a little young Christian boy sitting in the audience. I was like, "What am I watching?"
Oh
But
man.
it's I mean, our audience will see when we do it here in a few months, but it's an incredible play. But there's just like it's no holds bar. It's even more abrasive than Gallery because like Gallery for like the first 10 minutes lulls you in, and then like you get the first fuck, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh no, oh they actually swear in this play, what? Whereas Tortilla, like I think the first line has fuck in it, and it's
Oh yeah.
just like
One of
um
the characters, like spoiler, like his nickname kind of throughout the show is they call him Crass Steve, and he's kind of like Jackson turned up to 11, so
yeah.
he's a lot.
Jackson at 11 scares me. I just want to throw that out there. Okay, does any of the other people watching have questions for us, or anyone in the group? Feel free to turn your camera on and ask a question. No one, and I was just checking the group to see. So, if no one has a question, oh, Daniel has a
I
question.
don't want to
Daniel
hog
was just
all
looking.
of the question spotlight, but
Feel
if
free.
nobody else wants to, I definitely can. So it sounds like you definitely 100% your characters are your babies, and I have been just contemplating in my head, kind of just making my own character for a video game, even though it's never going to get in. And I realized that there's so many like little quirks I have to think about. How do you go through like making these small quirks or making the entirety of a character that fits into the world?
um Kind of going back to what I said about being like a rhythmic writer, having voice is really important to me, obviously, as a playwright. So like when I set out to like do Frank and Jackson, it was less about like let me do a character sheet about their pasts and histories at first. It was about what they sounded like as talkers, because it makes me sound like kind of a Looney Tune, or like I'm maybe like partially schizophrenic, but I say I have to go talk to my characters. So I'll get the voices right by just writing scenes about nothing. Like I have reams of scenes of just Frank and Jackson having conversations like in their college dorm and stuff that would never make it into a play, like talking about making grilled cheese, just to get the voice right in my head so that I can kind of just let myself go and let them talk through my fingertips. Because I will go back and I'll think about stuff as I start to kind of like make those discoveries about them. But really, I didn't do a lot of backwards digging even on these characters until Portrait, when I felt like I kind of had to answer some of those questions, because it's like, well, if it's worthy of a second play, then I should get to know them better, and I should know the answers to people's questions. Like, I call it my Harry Potter for a reason. Not that I admire J.K. Rowling right now, but just being able to like answer a question about your character's feelings or emotions or past life, I think is kind of important. Like if you ever generate fans of your work, people inevitably end up wanting to know that. So yeah, I kind of back research. Sorry, it was my boyfriend opening my door, not my cat. I thought it was my cat. Some tea. But yeah, lost my train of thought. Characters. Yeah, it really, for me, it's just conversational in the show. I feel like it comes out. In something like Arcade Fire, obviously, I have a real person to go off of. So that was more dramaturgical work. Um, and actually, Tortilla was spun off of a real person, not not as heavily as Arcade Fire, but we were watching Food Network. I used to be a tour actor, like going from town to town doing a musical like once a week. And we were in our hotel room and we were watching Food Network late night, and this guy named Dave Dickens was on Unwrapped, like talking about how he was the one that came up with like the tube to put the chips in so they didn't break, and whole play, because I just thought he was funny. Um, yeah, they just kind of
Interesting.
tell me themselves. the video game, I can imagine that would be interesting because you're building attributes for a character based around who they are. So I mean, like how they would play in a game is based on who they are. I'm not a huge gamer, even though I write about them, but I kind of get how games work.
Yeah, for me, when I was going into first making the character, I was like, okay, I can't even think about like who the character is. I have to make the abilities, or else I'm just gonna make some stupid abilities. So it's like, oh, that's never gonna be in the game. Cool.
And I guess that's kind of the same way I approach it in a sense, because like I let them talk first, but like if you have a list of abilities first, like you can garner a lot of information about how that might affect a personality or like a physicality or what they look like. That's kind of the interesting thing about writing plays with me. Obviously, if I have like a really stringent idea of what my characters look like, I don't think I really should have that, because actors should be able to come and audition and give you the best reading, no matter what their physical type is. I love race blind casting. I love gender blind casting. There's certain shows where it's like, no, those characters are written the gender they are for a reason. But I still admire it in my own works. I write modern bantery plays. Like it doesn't matter who plays my characters. But like in a video game, you can like totally control what they look like, which is kind of fun. Like obviously I have somewhat of an image of what they would look like in my head, because how can you not? But I try to not ever hone in on anything like that for theater, because you just shouldn't.